Wonderful. So if you want to look that up, Joshua chapter 1, right at the beginning, the book of Joshua, the sixth book in the Old Testament. And we're beginning a series, like we said, about God's faithfulness. God has been faithful. That's our story here at St. Swithin's in just 3 or 4 weekends' time, 5th and 6th of October. We'll be celebrating 10 years since we planted into the old St. Swithin's building to come and revitalise the church and have an impact on the local community and city. So we'll be celebrating all God's faithfulness in that time. And so we wanted to just spend the next 3 or 4 weeks just reminding ourselves of God's faithfulness. God's been faithful to us as a church. God has been faithful throughout history, as we can see from this story. But I'm sure as well, God has been faithful in our own lives as well. We might not always recognize it. We might be too busy sometimes to remind ourselves. But we want to just remember how faithful God is. And today we're going to use this story of Joshua to remind ourselves that God is faithful wherever you go. God's faithful wherever you go. Someone once said, the only thing in life that never changes is that everything changes. The only thing in life that never changes is that everything changes. And I don't know if you're the kind of person who loves change, like you thrive off change, you live for it, or maybe you're the kind of person who just really hates change. You don't like it. You'd rather things just stayed as they were. Or maybe like it's a bit of a mixture. Some change you love, other change you dread. So maybe just a quick show of hand. If you're the kind of person who loves change, you're up for it, anything, you thrive off it, just raise your hands. A few people like that. If you're the kind of person who hates any change, you'd rather things just stayed as they are. And if you're a bit of a mixture, you like some change, so we're fairly evenly split. But this is a time of year, I'm sure you're aware, when lots of change can happen. Who started a new school this week? Yeah, Reuben has. Okay, who started a new class? You've got a new class teacher? Yeah, brilliant. Anyone started a new job? Yeah, 1 or 2 people. It's a kind of year, it's the kind of time of the year where lots of things change. And for us as a church, as we celebrate 10 years, there's a sense of us moving on into the next chapter. This is all relatively new. The things God is going to lead us in are change. And the thing about new seasons, new changes, we can never quite be sure what they're going to look like. We're never quite sure how they're going to go. We're never quite sure how we'll feel. And so it's really natural to be a little bit anxious or nervous or even scared. Now, a couple of changing tack a little bit. A couple of summers ago, me and my daughters, we were on holiday in Cornwall, and we went on this thing called coast-steering. Anyone ever been coast-steering? No. Well, Laura has. I'm just going to show you a little video of what kind of coast-steering is and looks like, so if we can play that video. Okay, brilliant. Now, I don't know if this is beside the point, but as I watched that video, it seemed that the bloke pushed the kid off into... Did anyone know? So can we just watch that in slow-mo, just to see if that's what did happen? There's definite push there, isn't there? Definite push. Definite push. That's beside the point. But the point of coast-steering, if there is a point, other than just have fun, is you walk along the coastline, and there's various points on cliffs where you can jump off into deep water, or sometimes there's various like swirls and natural whirlpools that you can kind of play in and get spat out on. It is a lot of fun, believe me. But crucially, what you need to do, what you need to have on when you go coast-steering is one of these, is a life jacket. You've got to put a life jacket on. Just while I'm putting that on, if you want to have a quick, I did take a quick recording of me coast-steering, so if you could just play that as well, just while I get this done up. Usually I don't like to brag, but on that occasion. But what it means is if you've got one of these, I didn't actually check this for size, I might have grown a little bit since last time I wore it. What it means with one of these is that you can jump into the deep. You can jump into the unknown. You can jump into the slightly scary, but be confident you're not going to drown. Because this life jacket is designed to surround you. It's designed to keep you safe. It's designed to bring you out, to bring you to the surface. And so wearing one of these when you're co-steering, in theory at least, gives you more confidence to jump into the unknown, as opposed to if you weren't wearing one of these. Now, in our story today, we heard about Joshua. It's not the first time we've met Joshua. We've actually met him in the first 5 books of the Bible before. He was one of Moses' kind of right-hand men. Moses was one of the most amazing leaders the people of God had ever seen and still have ever seen. Moses had rescued God's people from being slaves in Egypt. Moses was like a proper Marvel hero. Moses was God's man. But now we read in Joshua 1 verse 2, God saying to Joshua in perhaps one of the most matter-of-fact statements in the Bible. God says to Joshua, Moses, my servant, is dead. Quite blunt. But this is a massive change, and Joshua and the people would have been feeling all at sea. Everything was changing. And then God quickly moves on to say, right, Joshua, you now are in charge. More change for Joshua. And God calls Joshua into something new. And then God says to Joshua, right, and you know that thing I promised you and my people about giving you a land of your own? Well, that's still my promise. And, well, Joshua, today's the day, and you're the man. So if you wouldn't mind getting all the people together, we're going to just cross the River Jordan and go into this new land that you know nothing about. Talk about a new season, a new change. The way things were has gone for Joshua. And now there's a change of leader. A change in what God is calling him to, a change in where they'll live, and who knows what that will look like. But if we look at that passage, Joshua chapter 1, it doesn't jump straight from chapter 1 verse 2, where God says, Joshua, you're going to lead my people. It doesn't jump straight from there to Joshua 1 verse 10, where Joshua begins to say to the people, come on, pack up, get ready, let's go. There's actually 7 verses in between. What are those 7 verses all about? Well, those 7 verses are full of promises that Joshua doesn't need to worry or stress or fear the change. He doesn't need to fear what God is calling him to. He doesn't need to worry about all the things he's unsure about, because God promises he'll be with him. He promises he will never leave him. In fact, these short 7 verses, which we've not got time to go into fully now, but which I'll be looking at more this evening, in these 7 verses alone, God reminds Joshua of his provision, his promise, his protection, his presence, so that Joshua can fulfill his purpose. And I love verse 9. And if you don't remember anything else this morning, I'd love you to remember this verse. It's going to come up on the screen here. Joshua 1 verse 9. Let's maybe read it together. Have I not commanded you? I can't hear you. Let's read it together. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. God's promises, God's faithfulness, God's presence are like a life jacket around us that give us confidence as we find ourselves jumping or feeling pushed into new things. When we feel out of our depth, his faithfulness is with us wherever we go. And that alone is what should give us strength and courage to go into the places and into the things that this new season has for us. I remember when I went off to university, I'd grown up in a Christian house, but I remember before I went off to uni thinking, do I want to kind of follow the faith of my parents, and what's this new journey going to be like, and how am I going to be? And I was quite nervous and anxious about it. And so I prayed, and God, I'm not saying you should necessarily always do this, but I opened my Bible at random. I said, God, if you're there, would you show me something? And I opened my Bible at random, and it fell open on this passage, Psalm 139, 71. I've written that down wrong. Psalm 139, some verse in there. I've forgotten it now. I've written this down. It says 71 to 10. That can't be right. But Psalm 139. And it says this, "Is there any place I can go to avoid your spirit, to be out of your sight? If I climb to the sky, you're there. If I go underground, you're there. If I flew on morning's wings to the far western horizon, you'd find me in a minute. You're already there waiting." When we were co-steering, I remember the instructor saying two things to us. Firstly, he said, the tighter you wear it, the better. If it's loose like it is now, you'd jump into the water and it would fly off and you run the risk of drowning. So the tighter you have it tightened, the more snug it is to you, the better job it's going to do. And in Joshua 1, verse 8, God says to Joshua, "Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night. Be careful to do everything written in it. Then you'll be prosperous and successful." The closer we keep to God our Father through His Word, through prayer, the more we will know His faithfulness, the tighter we'll be, the more those situations that are new and seem scary will seem possible and manageable. The second thing the instructor said was, if you get in trouble, not reassuring words, if you find yourself in trouble, if you go into an eddy, which is like a whirlpool, and you find yourself being sucked into that, don't worry. Trust the jacket to do its job and bring you out. In other words, don't fight it. Just trust that the buoyancy will pull you out. And it's the same with us. When we get into situations where we feel out of our depth, where things seem a little bit scary, we might want to fight, or we might want to try and make things right ourselves, rather than look to God. This passage in Joshua tells us to trust that the Lord is faithful. He will bring us out. And what I love about Joshua is that because he trusts in God's faithfulness, he in turn is faithful. What's the first thing Joshua does after the Lord has spoken to him? Verse 11, Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, we're going. Joshua's immediate response to hearing and being reminded of God's faithfulness is in turn to be faithful. Joshua is faithful. Joshua is strong and courageous, not because he's like some superhero, but because he knows the Lord is faithful, that the Lord will be with him, that the Lord will bring him out, that the Lord is with him wherever he goes. Just imagine if we got our heads around that promise. God is so faithful that he is with us wherever we go. Just think where you'll be this time tomorrow. Maybe in school, maybe at work, maybe at home, maybe chatting to different people. If we got our heads around the fact that God is with us, in fact, God is ahead of us, he's waiting for us in those places, how might that change the way that we choose to live? How might that change how bold and courageous and strong we are in our faithfulness? I'm going to take this off because it's rather hot. Would you like to stand as we pray?